Hi folks, this collection video has been a long time coming, and I want to apologize to Derren for taking so long. He wrote me back in late June, and for various reasons I kept on his this video kept on getting pushed down the queue, mainly because he hadn't asked me to do a video and others had, and others were asking specific questions, whereas Derren is just sharing his collection, his collecting philosophy and a little bit about his background. So it's very interesting, and I really wanted to do this video for a while. So again, I apologize, Derren, but here it is, better late than never, as the saying goes. So I'm going to read Derren's email, and then at the end I will show you a picture of his collection, which is just one watch. By the way, we are listening to Ahmad Jamal, the album One. Ahmad Jamal was a jazz pianist who, you know, he was a jazz pianist who was more popular, I think, in the 50s and 60s, mainly 60s. He was more straight ahead, and then, like a lot of the great jazz musicians of the time in the 70s, he became more exploratory, incorporated funk or R&B, and I tend to like that era, clearly and obviously. Anyways, so this is what Derren has to say. Ambrosia touched on a philosophy that was, at one time, a prevailing watch philosophy of middle-class America. First of all, Ambrosia, I think it was watch collection video number 21. Very, very awesome email she sent. I remember that video not doing it justice. It was very, very rambly, but not one of my better rambles. Anyways, so the prevailing watch philosophy of middle-class America, that the singular watch you wear becomes an unmistakable and proud part of your individual identity. This is a philosophy I find more appealing than curating a collection. So right there, in that first sentence, we see Derren lays out sort of the two of the polar philosophies in watch collecting. One is curating a collection, a great term, and the other is the singular watch that's your individual identity. And there are many layers or levels between that. Before I explain why, I'd like to share my father's requirements regarding watch ownership, a philosophy handed down to him from my grandfather. Rule 1. Every man should own and wear a watch every day. A watch is not only a convenience due to its obvious intended function, it conveys that time, especially the time of others, is important to you. Interesting. A man interested in knowing what time it is a man who makes and keeps his appointments, a sign of respectfulness and dependability. So that's kind of cool. Rule 1 being like, it's almost like a mark that you're a serious man, that you're a man that's going to, a man of your word, of respect, a gentleman, I guess you could say. Rule 2, the watch you wear should be of a sufficient quality, name recognition, and resale value that it can be easily sold or pawned in the event of an unexpected financial crisis. That sounds like Depression-era thinking, but I hear you. Some cold press iced coffee today. Rule 3. 1 watch is essential, 2 is effeminate. Upon hearing this third rule, I required further clarification, as effeminate is clearly being used in a derogatory manner. It was explained that choosing among watches based on mood or occasion relegates them to mere jewelry, jewelry being the exclusive domain of women. So that's pretty old school. We'll go further with that. Despite the early 20th century working class sexism at play within these rules, I find the philosophy behind owning just one watch very romantic. I like the conclusiveness of being able to say, this was my father's watch. The one he wore every day through good times and bad, rather than, this was my father's watch collection. I'm not really sure which was his favorite. Interesting point. Is it possible to appreciate fine watches and only own one? I think so. Much like the Corvette owners who subscribes to all the Corvette magazines and belongs to the local Corvette club, yet owns only one Corvette, his pride and joy. He studies the intricacies of the latest model, not with the intention of purchasing, but rather to add to his vast reserve of knowledge. Additionally, the one watch owner is not free from the neuroses that plague the typical watch enthusiast and simply a different form of neurosis. Interesting point. While the international watch community, TM, he puts a little trademark, expends a considerable amount of mental energy plotting the next purchase and second-guessing the most recent one, the one watch owner is obsessed with keeping the streak alive and taking irrational pride in years of faithfulness. If you're wondering if I adhere to these rules as defined by my father's father, the answer is yes. My Speedmaster and I are inseparable. Looking forward to more great videos. Regards, Derren H. He says, P.S., but I'm thinking I could use a dive watch, you know, for the beach. All right, so I replied to Derren just saying, great email, blah, blah, blah. Can I have a picture of it, make a video? And this is his response. By all means, you're welcome to turn it into watch collection philosophy video. I've attached a pic of my 2002 Speedmaster Professional 3570.50, my first quote-unquote real watch. Bought new from an authorized dealer upon receiving a raise from my employer. Worn daily for nearly 13 years. Why did I choose the Speedmaster? Its design is timeless, perfectly practical, practically perfect. Recognized by anyone with a genuine interest in watches, it's often a welcome conversation starter. It fulfills Rule 2. It wears well on a variety of straps, be it steel, leather, or nylon, but I suppose that makes me effeminate. Don't tell my dad. Regards. So, what a great email. I really like Derren's very thoughtful, clearly. And it's exactly the type of watch collection philosophy that I like to hear and share on this channel, because there's a little bit of fluff there. I don't agree with it 100%. I totally respect it, and I agree with much of it. But it's not about what is the right collecting philosophy. It's that they're all right. They're more right the more you believe them. You see what I mean? So this is clearly meaning. Wow, this song is really cheesy. I'm just gonna have to fast forward. It's clearly meaningful to Derren. It's very thought out, and my only suggestion, to be honest, would be for Derren, if I may be so bold. This was a philosophy handed down from your grandfather to your father. And I would rewrite it in your own way with your, I think that was obviously you writing it down, but like how would you adapt it to you personally, to the 21st century, to this era of man? Because certainly, I think the Rule 3 part is to me the sticking point, and I think to you were kind of saying you don't really buy into that sort of working class sexism. So why not take it a step forward? Why not say, this is my grandfather, pass this on to my father, now it's time for me to update it, upgrade it, adapt it, not only to myself, but the new context we live in, that we very well could have a female president a year from now. It's a different era. It's a totally different era. And I think men have been allowed to be more diverse in the way that they live, in this whole idea of metrosexual, right? Men, and underneath that is something to me that's very important and good, which is that we all have, whether we're men or women, we have a masculine and a feminine nature, and still in more traditional upbringings, the macho man's club, men are not allowed to be feminine in any way, which is a real problem, to be honest, and I think is behind a lot of the shit that we see out there in the world. And women have had to be able to claim their masculine side. So I think more and more we're moving into an era where people are going to be able to completely choose who they are, right? They're going to be able to, now we have all these different sexual identities and gender associations. And whatever you think about that, I'm not talking about you, Derren, but whoever is watching this, there's an underlying spirit of freedom there, which is that I can decide who I am. I can choose whether I'm male, female, or something else. And there's all these variations, and there's not just between male and female. There's it's a really interesting thing, and that's even a step even beyond taking it a step further than Derren's grandfather's and father's philosophy. But on the other hand, what I would say is, I wouldn't want to lose, there's something here within this philosophy that's really noble. And pure isn't quite the right word, but it's certainly, it's got a certain degree of integrity. And it is something that I think has been lost, right? As these old ways have broken down, part of that's a good thing because we're allowed to embrace newer and broader perspectives. But at the same time, we've lost sort of, there's this gentleman quality, this man of his word, this one watch that represents who I am. And I personally, this is just my take, I think that you can capture the most essential aspect of what you're talking about here in a watch collection. You can have your signature timepiece and then have maybe a couple other watches for different occasions as complementary pieces. Because in a way, you could say that this philosophy represents the idea, the older idea, that we are just this one thing. We are just a man, a gentleman of his word. Rather than we also have a feminine side or a spontaneous side, or, you know what I mean? We have these, we're all very diverse beings. And now that said, everyone has to find where they are in the spectrum between the one watch guy and the curating the collection guy or girl or woman or whoever we're talking about, right? And it certainly seems that Derren gravitates towards the one, but then he wants this dive watch. So I could see Derren with a 2 or 3 watch collection, to be honest. I could see Derren having his Speedmaster as his go-to watch, and then I could see you also having your fun dive watch, beach watch, that sort of thing, and then maybe another watch down the line. It's totally up to you. You weren't asking for my advice, but I'm more riffing off what you're saying and talking about how you can play with this philosophy and adapt it and evolve it and change it, where you're still holding on to the tradition that's been passed down to you from your grandfather to your father to you, but you're bringing it into your life, your context. I don't know how old you are, what generation you're from. In some ways it doesn't matter, you know. I mean, my guess is, based upon little subtle clues, you're probably 30s, 40s is my guess. I'm not sure. Anyways, yeah, I really enjoyed this video. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Yeah, so it would be really interesting if you're watching this, Derren. I'm going to email you just to let you know that I made this video in case you stopped watching the Johnny Casual channel in disgust for me not making your video. But I'd love to hear back from you and maybe update this, maybe do an addendum video eventually if that's something you're interested in. Like, how would you rewrite and adapt and evolve these rules to suit your own personal sensibilities? And if you ever get that dive watch, it would be really interesting to hear. All right, I'm going to leave it at that for now. All right, later, folks. More appealing than curating a collection. So right there in that first sentence, we see Derren lays out sort of the two of the polar philosophies in watch collecting. One is curating a collection, a great term, and the other is the singular watch that's your individual identity. And there are many layers or levels between that. Before I explain why, I'd like to share my father's requirements regarding watch ownership. The album One. Ahmad Jamal was a jazz pianist who, you know, he was a jazz pianist who was more popular, I think, in the 50s and 60s, mainly 60s. He was more straight ahead. And then, like a lot of the great jazz musicians of the time in the 70s, he became more exploratory, incorporated funk or R&B. And I tend to like that era, clearly and obviously. Anyways, so this is what Civic Questions, whereas Derren's just sharing his collection, his collecting philosophy and a little bit about his background. So it's very interesting, and I really wanted to do this video for a while. So again, I apologize, Derren, but here it is, better late than never, as the saying goes. So I'm going to read Derren's email, and then at the end, I will show you a picture of his collection, which is just one watch. By the way, we are listening to Ahmad Jamal. Hi, folks. This collection video has been a long time coming, and I want to apologize to Derren for taking so long. He wrote me back in late June, and for various reasons I kept on his this video kept on getting pushed down the queue, mainly because he hadn't asked me to do a video and others had, and others were asking us what Derren has to say. Ambrosia touched on a philosophy that was at one time a prevailing watch philosophy of middle-class America. First of all, Ambrosia, I think it was watch collection video number 21. Very, very awesome email she sent. I remember that video not doing it justice. It was very, very rambly, but not one of my better rambles. Anyways, so the prevailing watch philosophy of middle-class America, that the singular watch you wear becomes an unmistakable and proud part of your individual identity. This is a philosophy I find